Dude, the work ethic that I learned from Joe Herrera, and no BS here, is just, it just changed. I mean, it just completely, the trajectory of my life changed. I hung in, I stuck in pocket.
What's up, everybody? It's Joe Herrera coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada, fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, for the Team Leader Academy podcast. I'm here with my guy. I've known him for 24 years. Ben Ward. I met him when I was a young, snot-nosed missionary that thought I knew it all, and he was a younger, cleaned-up missionary that probably did know it all. We spent 4 or 5 months together, maybe a little bit less than that. But we've kind of followed each other and been kept in contact for years. My wife and I were talking the other day. He was one of 3 or 4 guys that actually came to our wedding, which was awesome. So he gave great marriage advice we watched our wedding video with our kids. And I don't remember I'm trying to remember exactly what the advice you gave, but as a young, unmarried kid, you were wise beyond your years. So, hey man, thanks for hopping on.
Great to be here.
So tell everybody that doesn't know you a little bit about yourself, kind of what your career path's been, where you're from. If I remember right, you were from Rancho Cucamonga, right? Home of Snoop Dogg?
Yeah, home of Snoop Dogg. Rancho Cucamonga. And everybody, so when we were in Washington together, you and I, people would ask, hey, where are you from? And you'd be like, oh, Las Vegas. And I'd say Rancho Cucamonga, and nobody believed me. They're like, right. Rancho Cuca, what? They thought it was like a cartoon or something.
Yeah. So catch me up. Like so you returned from your service. Did you go to college? You hop right into the business world. What's been your, the last 15, 20 years career-wise? I know you've done some really cool stuff.
Yeah. So after you and I knocked doors together, I went home and I went to school, and during the summers I went out and knocked doors. And I remember a friend told me that he made 10 grand in a summer. And I was like, what? Like 10 grand? I was like, the most I'd ever earned in a year stringing tennis rackets at Sports Chalet was like 7 grand in a year.
Right.
And I thought, if I could make 10 grand in a summer, my whole life would change. So I went out and my first 2 weeks I sold 0.
What were you seeing? Were you pest control, alarms?
Yeah, alarms, home security.
Yeah. And
so I was almost fired from a straight commission job. True story. And anyways, I pulled it together, and I'll never forget what I learned from you, brother. And you and I haven't talked face to face in how many years? Has it been like 18, 19 years?
It's been a long time.
Dude, the work ethic that I learned from Joe Herrera, and no BS here, is just, it just changed. I mean, it just completely, the trajectory of my life changed. I hung in, I stuck in pocket. And my first summer, I ended up making 25 grand straight commission. And I earned enough to pay for my school and buy a car. And then just the light speed, I'll just give you a quick little light speed update. The next summer, I went out and I doubled that. I made 50 grand, like building a little team. Then the next year I made 100 grand in the summer. The following year I made 286 grand. And then I jumped out of school and went straight all into this business. I built a region. I made over 400 grand the next year. The following year I ditched that. I'd earned $1 million of sales commission while I was in college, and I dropped out and I went in full blast, started a company, took it public a couple years later. And within a couple years after that, I had sort of arrived and I drove the business into the ground. And so I had this like rocket ship, and then I just I got pretty like confident in myself. And I started making decisions, kind of a young, some reckless decisions. And I drove it into the ground and I lost everything. Lost my car, ripped out of my driveway, lost my home. My house was foreclosed on.
Was this during the recession when everybody was struggling, or after that?
Yeah. So I started the business a year into the recession, and when the market had already tanked, and I was in sales, and so it's like create your own, and I during the initial years of the recession, it didn't impact me, and I was doing great. And then some funding that we had lined up dried up with our public company, and we're like, that's all right, we'll just sell our way out of it, which we did. But then part of what I'm not good at, it's not a superpower. I'll tell you my superpower is the operations back of sales. And so we sold the lights out of our product, and we had a bundled service, phone, internet, TV, and home security was the company that I built up, called Elevate. And our operations, we just didn't invest enough time, energy, the right people into our operations. So we sold a lot and then couldn't fulfill. And I ended up driving my business into the ground with that.
So I attended a training about 4 months ago in Orlando, Florida. And the guy that was there, have you read Rocket Fuel? Have you ever read that book?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we talked about the differences between visionaries and integrators. And one of the statistics they talked about was that for every 4 visionaries in the world, there's currently 1 operator. And how not operator, 1 integrator. And so just how valuable an integrator is in today's society, because sadly, guys like you and I who are visionaries and setting big visions and focusing on driving sales and things like that are a little bit more of a dime a dozen commodity than the integrators that can actually organize a business in a way that sustains its growth. So what's been kind of your takeaways from that experience, seeing the necessity for integration? How now do you find integrators in your world?
Yeah, one of the big. Have you ever read the book Great by Choice?
Yeah. No, I read Good to Great. I haven't read Great by Choice.
Okay, Great by Choice was a game changer in my life. And one of the things that I learned from it is you want to shoot bullets and calibrate. So like if you're playing it, well, let me finish the thought. So shoot bullets and then cannonballs. So like if you're playing, what's that game? Battleship. Before you go and start deploying all of your, but if you want to sink a battleship, you got to calibrate the cannonball. You just shoot bullets, little bullets, and you like miss, stink. Oh, maybe there's something to it. Stink, or miss. Okay, now you go stink, miss, and then stink, ding, 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 and then you got it, and then deploy the cannonball.
Yeah.
And what I learned is, one of the reckless life experiences that I would share with you, my friend, as we're just catching up after 20 years, and those who are listening, is, I hit a cannonball kind of early. Like I deployed a cannonball and hit, which was one of the biggest disasters, because I then thought, oh yeah, like everything. And so then I had my next venture that I started this business, and coming off of a pretty big high, and I deployed cannonballs like crazy that were uncalibrated. Meaning I put all of my energy, put my house on the line, my name, me and my wife's, every single thing. We deployed this cannonball because there's no way we're going to miss. And I mean, we sort of hit, but we blew our own battleship up because we just were not that good.
I love that. So I think there's entrepreneurship is a thing, right? Like, especially if we've had some success, then it's very natural for us to think we're invincible. And I think there's so much danger in that, because so my business partner and I have realized there's something in the world of entrepreneurship which is we believe we should be everything to everybody, especially when we've had some success. And as we've gotten to where we're able to say, have you read the book Who Not How?
Yeah, I love it. Benjamin Hardy.
Great book. Yeah. So it's all about what would happen in our world if we don't think we're everything to everybody, if we just become really good at the things we're really good at. So if we're locking in on that target, like you said, and we see that not just a concept or an idea or a business, but even in our own specific skill set, we notice that, man, when I hit this type of trajectory with this type of velocity, I not only do I find success with it, but I actually am fulfilled with it. then you start firing the cannonballs, and then everything else kind of falls away, and you're like, hold on, I can actually build a life for myself doing what I actually am good at and passionate about. I was talking to a kid yesterday who's, he just got done with his 2 years of service. He's back, trying to figure out what he's going to do with his life. And I was like, bro, making money is the easiest thing in the world for somebody like you. He's super talented, super good looking, super hardworking. I'm like, you're going to be successful. What you want to make sure you do is you put yourself in an environment where your success is a paradise and not a prison. Because I know so many successful people that are in prison. Like they're successful, but they're doing what they hate. So what's been that process for you to find, like, I know you're super talented. You'd be great at anything you've done. So how do you then build a world where you're focusing on the things that can help you provide for your family and provide for others while maintaining passion and not trapping yourself in a successful prison?
I love it. One of the things I found is the biggest threat to kind of like operating in your genius zone, kind of like your superpower. Your biggest threat to genius is your expert zones. And what I mean by that is as you lock in, as you get clear, as I've gotten very clear, and I'll tell you what that is as in this conversation right now. But as I get very clear on what I want, where I'm really good, where I can make the biggest contribution, and where I'd be the most fulfilled, right? The whole hedgehog concept from good to great, best in the world, fuel the economic engine, and passionate about, like, the biggest threat to that is the expert zones, is things you're good at, things that are like, hey, I need help here. Somebody calls you. Will you, like, hey, I got this need. Can you come help? And you're like, I can do that. Like, yeah, I'm really good at that. And they'll pay you good. And like blocking those out and like being like, no, like, that's not my superpower. That's not my genius area. And I remember my origin, like where I started learning, because I told you about falling on my face with my business and coming off of some success and failure, the ups and downs. We've all had the ups and downs of life, right? And Brian Tracy, I was at a mastermind retreat with him. He's one of my mentors and heroes, and he told me, we were in a little group with there was like 12 of us, and he's like, one of the biggest problems in the sales industry, in any sales, is that being good at sales and being good at leading other people are two totally different skill sets. And he said it's a problem, and it's such a problem universally because it's the people who are good at sales that get the promotions into leadership. They find themselves struggling like crazy. And dude, Joe, when he said that to me, it like hit me like a ton of bricks. Because it was me. That was me. I was a high-performing salesperson who now was in leadership, struggling like crazy. I've spent the last 15 years, since that time, obsessing on how do I develop myself as a leader to be able to duplicate the results that I've been able to get with the people I lead, and then how do I help other people that I'm promoting? How do I help them transition into leadership? And so I wrote the book, Fellowship, and I had Brian. I asked Brian to write the foreword because this stemmed off of that conversation. And in this book, Fellowship, basically, it's sales into leadership. We coined this word, how to transition from being great at sales to being great at leading other people.
Yeah. Well, and I think that there's so many areas that we think should be natural, right? Like somebody who's great at sales should be able to lead sales teams. Somebody who's great with people should be a great salesperson. And then as you, what I love about entrepreneurship, what I love about the real estate space, the sales space, is that you can't hide, because what ultimately matters in a meritocracy is production, like period. Like you can be great for company culture. You can be, everybody could love you. Everybody could enjoy being around you. But ultimately then what matters is your numbers. Do you produce? And then as a producer, you can put out great numbers, but then what ultimately matters as you move into leadership is not your production, but the people that you lead's production. So what have you found? How have you found success? Like what I've been geeking out lately is this principle, and I'm almost asking everybody I interview this because I'm so convinced of it. Nature versus nurture. Like I believe we are somewhere in the 80 to 85% range who we are naturally. Call it who we came down to earth as, or whatever you want to call it. So like when I look at my own children, I realize like I have maybe a 10 to 15% effect on their life to the positive or negative, but they're generally going to be who they're going to be because of who they are. And then I translate that into my, like our sales teams, and we'll interview 10 real estate professionals coming into our world. And I'm like, all 10 of them seem awesome. But what we don't know is what's going to happen when they're put into a sales environment. And for some reason, some people have it. For some reason, some people don't. And no amount of nurturing bad salespeople is going to make them great. And no amount of poor leadership is going to make a great salesperson terrible. So what's been your, like, I know that I kind of geeked out there for a second, but I'm really trying to figure out like nature versus nurture, how much to invest nurturing either in yourself or in others in an area where you're just not naturally good. How much of an effect can we really have on them?
Yeah, man. So that's the question. And so I've developed a blueprint that it's a 7-step framework, master strategies on how to transition from sales, like being just a high performer, really within any industry, to bridge the gap. And I found there's a common set of ingredients that makes somebody great at sales, that makes somebody that's great at sales great at leading. And so I don't know if I can share. We didn't do this before. Like I could share screen to show a little blueprint, just a little framework if you want.
Let me see if it'll let you. I can share my screen. So down at the bottom, does it have a share icon for you?
Yeah, share your screen is easy. It's good computer. All right, I can share screen. I'm gonna have to open system. Nah, I'm gonna have to open system.
Okay.
I'll just tell you, no big deal.
Well, we'll do it on a Zoom call sometime. I'd like to see it, but
yeah. And so what? I mean, the framework, it starts. Well, I don't know how much we want to like dive into the whole thing, but bottom line, I do a master class where I work with high performing salespeople that are transitioning into leadership, and I walk them through this framework. I call it the sellership system, and it's actually back of the framework for my book is built around like the principles around what it takes, to really make the shift into leadership and to perform in a way where you unlock and unleash what makes you great into the people you lead. And the problem, one of the problems is, you don't want to duplicate yourself as a leader. Like you don't want a bunch of Joe Herreras running around,
Yeah.
But you do want to duplicate Joe Herrera's performance. And so, and so like, how do you do that? And there's, I'll just rattle a few things off and we can go deep into any of them if you want, but there's 3 laws of Genshai. And Genshai is an ancient Hindi word, which means to never treat another person in a manner that would make them feel small. Yeah, it's powerhouse. But there's 3 laws of Genshai as a foundation, and for a leader, So like when you're a high performing salesperson, man, you're holding the trophy. Like the spotlight's on you, you get the trophy. Now as a leader, the question becomes, when results are performed, you're the leader. I mean, you're responsible, but who holds the trophy? Is it you holding that trophy and like you got your team like, yep? Or, one of the hardest things is learning how to hand out that trophy to other people, right? And it's the whole window and mirror principle. When things are going really right, there's a temptation, as a salesperson, we're looking in the mirror and being like, yeah, things are good. I'm doing good. But as a leader, man, we want to look out the window and be like, things are going really good. Who can I look out the window to shine light on them for how great things are going? Just these little shifts, just at the foundation. There's these 7. That's like right at the foundation of what it takes to start making the shift to unlock others. And I talked about, you don't want a bunch of Joe Herreras running around. What you want is Joe Herrera's performance. And so to duplicate your own results, how do you connect with and align with the people you lead? And one of the master principles for transitioning into leadership is learning this little shift, which is there's a temptation as a new leader or any leader to be like, hey, follow me, I'm the leader, and let's go. But the shift is, before I say follow me, I find you. And I find you, and there's 3 keys on how to find somebody. So as you lead, I call it the vital few. There's a few key critical pieces to find. Let's say, you're on my team, Joe, and we work together. Like the most valuable thing I could do is find you where you're at, and then meet you where you're at. And then there's one of the next phases, 4 keys to take you from where you are to where you really want to be. And so I teach all that stuff on how to transition into leadership.
No, it's solid. One of the reasons I reached out and said, hey man, I'd love to have you on the podcast. You just wrote a book recently. It's got a unique title, but I love the principle behind it. So talk a little bit about the thought process and passion that went into your latest book.
Yeah. So I've learned through my, 20 years I've been in sales, leading sales teams, mentoring, coaching, training sales leaders, executives. And I found that the number one problem that stops more sales than anything else, and it's not your skill set. It's not like the way that you stand when you're like, dropping the price. It's not the, your tone, your pitch. It's not going up at the end of it's not like, your tonality. It's not it's not the questions you ask. It's not memorizing the close. It's not all those skills. Those are all learnable. And that's a minimum standard. You just have to be good at those things. You have to get good. Right. You got to practice. You got to improve. The number one blocker for more sales than anything is this. I'll say it kind of like this. Like, let me just ask you, Joe, if you're growing a garden, what's inevitably going to creep into that garden?
Weeds.
Boom. Weeds. Weeds are going to get in there. And so you got to get in and you got to pluck the weeds out of the garden. If you don't, there's 3 major things that weeds are going to do. 1, they steal the nutrients from what you're trying to grow. 2, they wrap their roots around the roots of what you're trying to, they like wrap their roots around. And 3, they just take up space in your garden and they don't look good. And so like, you got to get in, you got to pluck the weeds or they destroy your garden. Well, listen, our minds are the exact same. We may have this incredible idea, this like idea plant. You'd be like, I'm going to join Joe Taylor Group. I'm going to crush it. I'm going to, it's going to take some time and I'm going to follow and I'm going to, we're going to plug into this rad system and I'm going to crush my goals. And these are my specific goals. I'm going to double my earnings over you're going to have this like idea plant. Inevitably, this, I know this, we've learned this. Weeds of the mind will creep in. You'll be fired up and then no matter what, you'll be like ready to go and you're starting to get into traction. Weeds of the mind, common weeds, there's 3 of them: fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or FUD. Mm-hmm. My book is called Pluck the FUD. and you know what? It's some kind of really special, bro. I'm getting a little emotional actually as I think about this. I got to just tell you, you didn't know this, but in my acknowledgments, you didn't know this at all. I never told you. I just had to throw this in here because you've had such an impact in my life. There's kind of some people I call out here. Joe Herrera, my missionary companion who trained me and taught me a work ethic. You taught me a work ethic. I'll never forget the vision of you in front of me on the bike. You're always in front of me, just pushing, going, and like, you're like, Ben, let's go, charging. And you taught me like, hey, what do you need a lunch for? Like, and like, hey, let's skip lunch. I'm like, what? We're going to skip lunch? You're like, yeah, let's work harder. And that work ethic compounded over time has helped me to pluck the FUD, to get rid of the fear. When we're in momentum, when we're in motion creates emotion. And we got to get rid of the fear and take action. And so I said a lot there. Let me just say this one little last sentence, and then I'll toss it to you for a second. But like, I've learned the number. So I mentioned about the skills to be successful is the easy part. The hard part in achieving results is learning how to guard your mind, how to pluck the FUD and take action despite the inevitable fear. That's what separates somebody who's good to somebody who's unbelievable. Because anybody can learn the skills, but how do you getting yourself to take action when the world is telling you to stop, when it's too hard, when all the fears and anxiety and insecurity, how do you get yourself? And this book is filled. Chapters 2 through 10 is all about how my strategies, tactical strategies on how I've learned to get myself to take action. What I've taught tens of thousands of sales leaders all over America on how to pluck the FUD.
So talk about, you bring this thing to Audible? Are you working on that? Is it purely just like, how do people get access to the book?
Yeah, you can get it anywhere. You can get it you can get on my website, benward.com. You can get it on Amazon, get on Barnes and Noble. You can get it, just go online and get it anywhere. And the Audible is done. I read it. So it's my voice. There's a little process through it. This just came out last week. And so the Audible will come out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Well, I think it's such a powerful principle. I think when you're young and you're passionate, you just plow through everything, right? As you get into the wealth creation years, I think as much as Gary Vee will say, like a 22-year-old kid can create, immeasurable wealth, I think you really, from 35 to 50 is really the wealth creation years where you have enough experience, you have enough connections, you have enough knowledge to really create. It is, I have noticed that's when your mind starts playing tricks on you. Your body slows down, your mind slows down. I think fear, uncertainty, doubt, they're really powerful principles because we love to talk about positivity. We love to talk about momentum. We love to talk about faith. We love to talk about all these super positive things. But we talked a little bit, maybe before we went on air, about full entrepreneurship. Like or maybe it wasn't. But anyways, like there's this society now. If you watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix, it just talks about, if you're really into conspiracy theories and you end up on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok watching conspiracy theory videos, next thing you know, they're going to feed you more conspiracy theories. And your mind operates very similar to the AI engines of Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Like if you ever notice, you start geeking out on surfing or golfing or whatever, next thing you know, you're getting ads and more videos about surfing or golfing. And it just keeps going. So I would imagine you've really deep dove into the principle of like, if you focus on fear, you're going to have more things to be fearful about. And then more fear is going to come, and then more uncertainty is going to come, and doubt's going to hit you. If you could walk us through a quick exercise, like how do you overcome the constant state of fear or the constant state of uncertainty, the constant state of doubt? I'm sure it's longer than a couple minute explanation, but what are some of the simple principles you use that you've created, you're not following in the footsteps. You didn't inherit your dad's, public speaking, leadership, entrepreneurship company. You built it yourself. I've built my partner and I from scratch have built a real estate company that now is in 7 or 8 different states. And we've got, 1,300 agents across North America. I didn't inherit anything. Like I've had to build. But then there's that point where you go, wait a minute, Ben, you can't write books. You can't speak to thousands and thousands of people. Like, who are you? You're just a kid from Rancho Cucamonga. So like anybody who tries to do something has that moment where they're like, I can't do this. I'm just me. So walk us through some of that stuff.
Yeah. So in the book, I teach the fearless formula. And it breaks down each chapter as one component of the fearless formula and kind of bring it all together at the end. I'll just pull one principle from it. I was teaching my kids. Let me see if I pull a picture while I'm saying this. Teaching my kids about this just the principle that like you are not your thoughts. And just because you have a thought, that does not mean that it represents what you actually think and how you actually feel. And I was teaching them, we're sitting around in our living room, and I taught them that you can reject thoughts that don't serve you, kind of like a bouncer would reject somebody that doesn't belong to a club. Like, you have this thought, you're like looking at it, you're like, no. And there's a four word powerful tool that I taught my kids, and I'll share a little experience. My little daughter Emery applied this, and so it's like this tool is like ant spray to the brain, to the ants of the brain. The ants are the automatic negative thoughts, little acronym ANTS, right? The automatic negative thoughts that creep into our brains. You have them, Joe. I have them. We have them. The question is, what do we do when the ants come marching into the door of our mind? And so the ant spray to the brain. I was teaching my kids this, and it's like there's 4 words, and I was like, all right, everyone stand up, and they're like, Dad, what? Come on. I'm like, no, I'm serious, stand up. and they're like, all right, before say this with me together. I reject that thought. Ready? And on the count of 3, I reject that thought. And so we did it as a family, and I have a little video actually we did later of our family saying, I reject that thought. I'll send it to you later. But Joe, next day, Emery, my little girl, came running back from school. She's like, Daddy, yeah, Daddy. Because I challenged them to reject a thought tomorrow at school. Like, because it was late at night, I'm going to bed. I'm like, hey, tomorrow at school, I want you to reject a thought. So Emery comes back, Daddy, I rejected a thought today. And we're like, oh, cool, tell me about it. She's like, okay, well, my teacher said that I'm going to have a quiz. And I was like, man, I hate quizzes. And she said to herself, so I'm no good at quizzes. and then she's like, wait a minute, I reject that thought. And so she's like, and then she went and she took the quiz and did great on it, came home all fired up, and she annihilated the ants. It's just one little tool. When we have a thought that comes to our brain, we can reject thoughts that don't serve us.
It's super powerful, man. Well, listen, we could go on for hours and unpack a lot of stuff. Need to get a couple of copies of your book. I'll have Leilani reach out. I want to read it. I want to get our team to read it. It's the longer you do something, the longer you're in the entrepreneurship game, you realize that as much as your natural talents and abilities could build, in order to maintain, you have to improve. You have to improve your physical body. You have to improve your mind. There's so many things at play now that didn't exist 20 years ago. Technology has really been a blessing, but it's absolutely a curse. And there's so much negativity that floats around. Like this fun, quick story. My father-in-law is 79 years old. And on the 4th of July, we were sitting in my pool, and he said, I think I need to stop watching the news. And I said, why? And he said, well, every time I watch it, it just gets me riled up, and I feel like the world's coming to an end. And I said, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you just stop? And he's like, well, I feel like I need to be informed. And I was like, for what? And he was like, well, I mean, I need to know what's happening. And I was like, well, do you question like your voting record? Like, are you going to change who you vote for on a regular basis? He's like, no. And I was like, well, I mean, do you have food? Do you have gas? Do you have a house? He's like, yeah. I was like, you're 80 years old. You're just tormenting yourself listening to these negative, influences. And I told him, I said, you realize that the media channel that you listen to is purely exists to sell you like Cialis and heart medication and stuff like that, right? Like they're not actually there to educate you to make wise decisions. The principle behind it was you have to be careful of the influences that you take into your mind, because your subconscious is affected by these things, that as you ingest negative information and positive information, you can't just expect your subconscious to figure it all out. You become what you ingest. Just like food, your mind becomes what you ingest. And so then you go through this gnarly process of saying, I want to be educated, but I want to be educated on positivity. I want to be educated on progress. I want to be educated on fuel that creates a greater world for myself. And so it's awesome. I think, man, I love what you're doing. I've always, respected your entrepreneurship, your dedication, your hard work, your commitment. You're obviously a super talented person. And so grateful to reconnect. Looking forward to doing a little bit more. Thanks for hopping on.
Thank you. Great to be here with you, brother.